Raymond Childs, leave the inspection packet closed.
Those are housing quality files. I'm authorized to sign.
Once is a mistake. Twice is suspicious. Raymond Childs signed off on this same play across dozens of apartments over 3 years and left a paper trail for every single one.
Passes on units later condemned.
Inspectors judge conditions on the day they're there.
Your judgment changed when landlords paid you.
You're calling discretion disruption because a reinspection disagreed?
He would not get to finish that sentence. What Raymond Childs did not know, as the handcuffs closed around his wrists, was that federal investigators had already re-inspected 41 of the apartments he had personally passed as safe. Every single one had failed. 14 had been condemned outright, and the families still living inside them, some entering their third winter without heat, would finally have their complaints read into the record. 3 years, $62,000 in cash bribes, 93 subsidized families placed into units he knew were unfit to live in. Before we go any further into this one, I have a question for you. Have you ever rented a place where something was broken and no one would fix it? No heat in January. A breaker box that hummed when you touched the wall. A ceiling stain that kept growing. Drop that story in the comments, because part of what you are about to hear only makes sense if you have lived on the wrong side of an inspection like this one. And if you are new to this channel, hit subscribe. We cover accountability cases like this every single week, and this one gets substantially worse before the auditor gets involved. Raymond Anthony Childs was born in June of 1969 in Fairmont County, Maryland, the second of 4 children raised in a red brick row house on the eastern edge of Halversham. It was one of the older post-war neighborhoods that had once been solidly middle class and by the middle 70s had started slipping. His father, Anthony Childs, worked as a boiler mechanic at the Fairmont General Hospital heating plant for 31 years. His mother, Dolores Childs, cleaned rooms at the Holiday Inn near the interstate and later kept the books for a small carpet cleaning company off Route 40. The family did not own the row house they lived in for the first 12 years of Raymond's life. They rented it from a landlord named Mr. Prescott, and every August that landlord would send a nephew around with a clipboard to check the property before renewing the lease. Raymond remembered the nephew because the nephew never actually looked at anything. He wrote on the clipboard while standing in the front room, said the words "looks good," collected the rent check, and left. Raymond watched him do it for the first time when Raymond was 10 years old. He would remember it later. Everyone would. Raymond attended Halversham Public School through the 9th grade, then transferred to Fairmont Central Vocational High School, where he enrolled in the building trades track. His teacher on the mechanical systems side, a man named Mr. Weatherby, wrote in a 1986 progress report that Raymond was quiet, meticulous, more comfortable with a tool in his hand than a book, and that he showed strong aptitude for HVAC diagnostics. Raymond graduated in June of 1987 and took a job the following Monday as an entry-level maintenance technician at Fairmont Central Realty, a residential property management company that owned or managed roughly 200 rental units across the county. His starting wage was $6.20 an hour. For the next 14 years, Raymond worked the maintenance side of the rental business. He replaced water heaters in flooded basements. He rewired outlets that landlords had ignored for a decade. He climbed into crawl spaces in the dead of January to relight pilot lights for tenants who had gone 3 days with no heat. He knew, from those 14 years, exactly what a habitable apartment looked like and exactly what a dangerous one looked like, because he had personally been the one crawling under both. In 1996, he married a woman named Yvonne Prather. They had one daughter, Alicia, born in 1998. In 2001, Raymond, then 32 years old, applied for a position with the Fairmont County Housing Authority. The listing was for a habitability standards inspector, grade 7, starting salary $34,300 a year, with a state pension and full benefits. His application cited his 14 years of hands-on maintenance experience. He was hired on his second interview. His supervisor at the time, a woman named Miriam Cardwell, wrote on his 90-day evaluation that Raymond was detail-oriented, respectful with tenants, and unusually knowledgeable about the mechanical systems he was inspecting, especially for a new hire. For his first 8 years on the job, Raymond Childs was, by every account, a good inspector. He failed units when they needed to fail. He wrote correction orders that were specific enough for landlords to actually understand what needed to be fixed. He returned for re-inspections without being asked. In 2007, he was promoted to senior inspector, grade 9. In 2011, he was promoted again to field team lead. His salary at that point was $58,200. His pension was fully vested. His daughter was 13 years old and had just started at the county magnet school for math and science. Then, in the fall of 2011, the Housing Authority lost its administrative director in a corruption scandal that had nothing to do with Raymond. In the reshuffling that followed, the inspection department was moved under a new deputy commissioner. Field oversight was reduced. The number of required annual re-inspections per inspector went from 200 to 380. The number of inspectors on the roster stayed at 11. That mattered. It would matter more later. It mattered most to Raymond, whose district covered the 2 poorest zip codes in the county and whose caseload had, almost overnight, nearly doubled. To understand what Raymond Childs did, you have to understand what the Housing Choice Voucher Program, the program most people still call Section 8, is supposed to do. A qualifying family, usually one at or below 30% of the area median income, is issued a voucher. That voucher pays a portion of their monthly rent directly to a private landlord. In Fairmont County, in the mid-2010s, that portion averaged $1,140 per month per family. The tenant paid the remainder, typically between $100 and $300, out of pocket. For the landlord, a Section 8 tenant meant something specific. It meant a guaranteed federal payment on the first of every month, deposited directly into their operating account, regardless of whether the tenant paid their share or not. It meant a stable income stream on a unit that, in many cases, would otherwise sit vacant. It also meant one very specific thing they had to accept in exchange. Before any voucher payment could be released, and before every annual renewal after that, the unit had to be inspected and passed under the federal housing quality standards. 12 categories: sanitary facilities, food preparation, space and security, thermal environment, illumination and electricity, structure and materials, interior air quality, water supply, sanitary condition, lead-based paint, access, site and neighborhood. The inspector was the safeguard. That was the entire point of the position. Somebody had to walk into that apartment, look at the wiring, put a hand on the radiator, run the kitchen tap, check the smoke detector, and confirm that the family being placed there was not being placed into a unit that would kill them. The federal money followed the pass. Without the pass, the landlord got nothing. With it, the money flowed for another 12 months. The system had a specific weakness, and everyone inside it knew what the weakness was. The inspector was one person. The inspector signed off with an initial and a date on a paper form. The inspector's word, unless something later exposed it, was the only word on record. Follow-up re-inspections did happen, but they were rare. In Fairmont County in 2013, roughly 1 in 22 past units was pulled for a random supervisory recheck, which meant that on any given inspection, the odds of a supervisor ever double-checking the inspector's work were less than 5%. Nobody talked about it that way in training, but the numbers were the numbers, and the inspectors knew them. There was another element that mattered. In Fairmont County, roughly 6,200 families depended on the voucher program in any given year. The waiting list at the Housing Authority was 7 years long. If a family was placed into a unit and their inspector had passed it, they had almost no leverage to complain later. A family that lost the unit lost their voucher. A family that lost their voucher went back to the bottom of that 7-year list, which meant that families who moved into apartments they knew were unsafe often stayed silent, for the same reason a person clinging to a rope does not let go to argue about the fibers. That was the system Raymond Childs had spent almost a decade protecting. It was also the system he was about to sell. The first bribe did not come from a landlord Raymond had never met. It came from a man he had known for 6 years, His name was Delroy Van Sant. He owned 4 multifamily buildings in the Halversham corridor, 71 units in total, and Raymond had inspected them every year since 2008. In August of 2013, Raymond arrived at Van Sant's building on Wexler Avenue to conduct the annual HQS inspection on a 2-bedroom on the 3rd floor. The heat did not work. That was the beginning of it. The boiler in the basement was original to the building and had been condemned 2 years earlier by a private HVAC contractor whose report Van Sant had ignored. Van Sant had installed 3 plug-in space heaters in the 2-bedroom, which is itself a violation, and had told the tenant, a woman named Patrice with 2 elementary school-age children, that the real furnace was being repaired. It was not being repaired. Raymond, standing in that apartment on a mild August afternoon, could not tell that the heat did not work by looking at it. But he could tell by looking at the boiler in the basement. He had seen that model of boiler before. He knew what a red condemnation tag from the county fire marshal looked like. Van Sant met him at the boiler. Van Sant did not deny it. Van Sant said, in a conversation later reconstructed from Van Sant's own eventual proffer, "Raymond, that boiler is going to cost me $14,000 to replace, and my tenants are going to be sitting in space heaters until November either way. Give me the pass now, and I will have it fixed by the first frost. And there's $1,000 in it for you for the inconvenience." Raymond gave him the pass. The boiler was not fixed by the first frost. It was not fixed at all that winter. Patrice and her 2 children spent the coldest 3 months of 2013 running 3 space heaters through extension cords that Van Sant had told them, wrongly, were rated for the load. The bribe was paid in cash in an envelope inside a Chinese takeout bag left on the front seat of Raymond's county sedan in the Housing Authority parking lot 4 days later. Raymond took the envelope home. He did not tell his wife. That was the first one. What made it dangerous was that nothing happened. No audit. No complaint that reached the office. The tenants either did not call or called and got nowhere. The unit renewed the following August with a routine inspection Raymond also passed. Van Sant was, as Van Sant himself later told federal agents, a satisfied customer. Word travels among a certain kind of landlord in a certain kind of market. Within 8 months, Raymond was being approached by 3 other property owners in his district. The pattern he settled into was clinical. He did not solicit. He waited. He would arrive at an inspection where the unit was, in his own professional judgment, unfit. He would find the violation. He would name it out loud, standing in the apartment, in front of the landlord if the landlord was there, and he would let the landlord respond. If the landlord offered to fix it, Raymond wrote it up as a fail and scheduled the re-inspection. If the landlord offered him money, Raymond named a number. His number, from 2014 onward, was consistent: $800 for minor violations, $1,200 for a mechanical fail, $2,000 for a structural fail that required an inspector to close his eyes to something a supervisor could later spot on paper. He was careful. He spread the bribes across enough landlords that no one building carried an unusual pattern. He never passed a unit for the same landlord twice in a row without a legitimate fail somewhere in the same portfolio. He kept the cash in a fireproof safe in the guest bedroom closet at home, behind boxes of Christmas ornaments his wife had not looked at since 2004. He never deposited any of it. He never bought anything traceable. He drove the same 2009 Chevy Malibu he had bought when his daughter started high school. He wore the same 3 pairs of khakis into the field year after year. He looked from every angle a coworker or supervisor might see him from, like a man who was exactly what his W-2 said he was. The dollar amounts began to grow anyway. By early 2015, he was collecting roughly $1,400 per month in cash bribes. By 2016, it was closer to $2,200. By the middle of 2016, he had passed, or was actively passing, apartments with the following conditions documented later by federal investigators. A unit on Kenmore with an active roof leak into a bedroom ceiling that had already begun to sag. A unit on Bellhaven Street with knob and tube wiring that had never been upgraded, and a fuse box with 3 double-tapped breakers. A unit on Halversham Avenue with a bathroom exhaust vent that terminated inside the ceiling instead of outside the building, saturating the framing with moisture and growing a colony of black mold behind the drywall. A basement unit on Oakleaf that had no window egress from either bedroom. The families were placed anyway. That was the part he did not let himself think about. He filed the paperwork. He initialed the pass. He drove to the next inspection. And the units for a while kept quiet. The building was 4218 Halversham Avenue. 4 stories, 16 units, red brick, built in 1948. Raymond had personally passed every unit in that building for 4 consecutive years. In August of 2018, he passed it again. Vincent had sold the building the previous year to a limited liability company operated by a man named Trent Woolwine, who was, in the parlance of federal fraud investigators, a portfolio consolidator. Woolwine owned pieces of 19 buildings across 3 counties. He paid Raymond $1,500 in cash the afternoon of the 2018 annual inspection to sign off on a boiler that had been failing intermittently for 2 years, a stairwell egress door that no longer latched properly, and 3 units on the north side of the building with persistent water intrusion behind the kitchen cabinetry. The winter of 2018 into 2019 was the coldest Fairmont County had seen since 2003. The boiler at 4218 Halversham failed completely on December 27th. It came back on for 6 days in January and failed again on the 13th. It stayed dead for the rest of the winter. Woolwine's answer, again, was space heaters. 31 of them, purchased in bulk from a discount hardware store on the eastern edge of the county, distributed one to a bedroom. A tenant on the 3rd floor named Maricela Odom, mother of 4 children ages 3 through 11, called the Fairmont County Housing Authority tenant hotline on January 21st. Her call was logged. She said the heat had been out for weeks. She said her 3-year-old had developed a persistent cough. She said the space heater in her children's bedroom had thrown a spark the night before, and she had unplugged it. She was told, per protocol, that a complaint would be forwarded to the inspection department. The complaint was forwarded to the inspection department. Because 4218 Halversham was in Raymond Childs' district, the complaint was routed to Raymond Childs. He never followed up. He documented the complaint as landlord notified, repairs pending. Maricela Odom called again on January 28th. She called on February 4th. She called on February 11th, when her daughter's cough had become bronchitis. On February 18th, she called a 4th time, and this time her call was answered not by the routine intake clerk, but by a temporary auditor from the State Office of Housing Compliance, who had been assigned to Fairmont County that month for an unrelated document review. Her name was Priscilla Nagel. She was a former building code inspector out of Anne Arundel County who had spent 22 years in the field before moving to state audit work. Priscilla Nagel listened to Maricela's complaint. Then she pulled the inspection file on 4218 Halversham. Then she pulled the tenant complaint log. Then she pulled every inspection report Raymond Childs had signed in the preceding 12 months. Then she got in her state-issued vehicle and drove to 4218 Halversham Avenue herself, unannounced, on February 20th, 2019, at 2:15 in the afternoon. She walked through 8 units. She did not sign a single pass. Priscilla Nagel's re-inspection report on 4218 Halversham Avenue, filed on February 21st, 2019, ran to 43 pages. She condemned 3 units outright, cited the boiler as an active life safety hazard, and referred the file to the State Fire Marshal, the County Code Enforcement Bureau, and the Office of Inspector General for the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Within 72 hours, a federal investigation had been opened. The lead agent was a woman named Special Agent Delphine Kaczmarek of HUD OIG, working in cooperation with the Fairmont County State's Attorney's Office and the FBI's Baltimore Field Office Public Corruption Squad. Kaczmarek pulled every inspection report Raymond Childs had signed since 2013. There were 3,184 of them. She selected a stratified sample of 240 units, weighted toward the ones Raymond had passed most recently, and dispatched an independent inspection team out of the state office to recheck each one. Of the 240 units re-inspected, 141 failed. 41 failed with life safety violations that should have prevented the unit from ever being subsidized. 14 were condemned outright, and their tenants ordered relocated at emergency federal expense. The total federal subsidy paid on the failing units over the preceding 3 years was calculated at just over $4,800,000, all of it flowing to landlords whose properties should never have been in the program. Kaczmarek turned to the money next. Raymond's bank records showed nothing. His declared income matched his tax filings. His mortgage was current. His car was paid off. His daughter's tuition at Frostburg State was covered through grants and a modest 529 that his wife had opened when Alicia was born. On paper, Raymond Childs looked exactly like the honest inspector his files said he was, which is what made Kaczmarek pull the landlord side records instead. Delroy Van Sant kept a ledger, not a full one, a partial one. In a spiral-bound notebook that he stored in the office of the leasing company he ran out of a strip mall storefront on Route 40, Van Sant had, for reasons his own defense attorney would later describe as an act of profound self-injury, recorded outgoing consulting payments to a Mr. C at irregular intervals from 2013 forward. The payments matched, in date and amount, with cash withdrawals from Van Sant's business account of $800 to $2,000. And on a separate page, dated August 14, 2013, in Van Sant's own handwriting, was a single note that read simply, Wexler passed, OARC 1000, deliver Fry. Kaczmarek subpoenaed Van Sant's records on March 14th. She interviewed Van Sant on April 2nd. Van Sant, facing his own set of charges and eyeing a cooperation agreement, walked her through the entire arrangement. His statement was corroborated by 2 other landlords who came forward within the next 6 weeks, each of them offering the same cooperation deal, each of them producing records of payments, and one of whom, a man named Cornell Deutscher, had actually saved text messages. The texts were the smoking gun. They were not many. Raymond had been careful, but there were 7 of them, spread across 3 years, that were unambiguous. On September 12, 2015, Deutscher had texted Raymond, "Ready for you Thursday. Building looks great from the inside." Raymond had replied, "See you at 10. Same as last time is fine." On October 1, 2016, Deutscher had texted, "Boiler still throwing that code. Won't be fixed by inspection. What are we thinking?" Raymond had replied, "Same number, same envelope. Don't leave it on the seat this time." On December 3, 2017, Raymond had texted first, "Skip the walkthrough on the 3rd floor. I've got what I need." The texts closed it. But the smoking gun that would carry the case for the jury, the one Kaczmarek would frame in her opening statement, was not the texts. It was the paper. Kaczmarek had the state's independent inspection reports on one side, Raymond's original pass reports on the other side. Same unit, same address, same year. 2 documents signed by 2 different inspectors, one of them Raymond, describing the same apartment as if they were describing 2 different planets. Where Raymond had written boiler operational, no visible defect, the state inspector had written boiler condemned, immediate life safety hazard, tenant relocation required. Where Raymond had written electrical satisfactory, the state inspector had written knob and tube wiring, double-tapped breakers, imminent fire risk. Where Raymond had written no visible mold, the state inspector had cut a 6-inch square of drywall out of the bathroom wall and photographed the black colony behind it. 41 units, 41 side-by-side comparisons, every one of them with Raymond's initial and date on the pass side. We are about to get into the confrontation in the courthouse. Before we do, if this case is making you angry, drop a comment about who you think should be answering for it. Because I want to be honest with you, Raymond is not the only person about to be named on the record here. Subscribe if you have not already. This channel does not let stories like this quietly get filed and forgotten. The arrest was scheduled for 6:52 a.m. on the morning of May 8, 2019. Federal agents chose that time deliberately. Raymond's daily routine was consistent. He left the house at 7 a.m. every weekday, carrying a black leather portfolio, a travel mug of coffee, and a laminated county ID badge on a lanyard. Kaczmarek wanted him in the driveway, not in the office. She wanted him on his own front step, where the neighbors would eventually see, where his wife could later say she had known nothing. Two unmarked vehicles pulled up as Raymond was locking the front door behind him. Kaczmarek stepped out of the passenger side of the lead vehicle in a navy windbreaker with HUD OIG stenciled across the back. A Fairmont County detective and two FBI agents followed. Raymond stopped on the top step. He did not move. He did not speak for what the body cam footage would later show was 7 full seconds. Kaczmarek spoke first. "Mr. Childs, Raymond Childs, I have a warrant for your arrest on federal charges of bribery, honest services fraud, and conspiracy. I also have a search warrant for this residence and for your vehicle. I need you to step down off the porch and place the portfolio on the top step." Raymond did not put the portfolio down. He looked past her, at the neighbor across the street who had opened the front door to get the morning paper and had stopped mid-motion. Then he looked back at Kaczmarek. "Which building?" Kaczmarek did not answer him. "Which building?" "Halversham." "Sir, I need you to place the portfolio on the step." He put the portfolio down. Then he sat down on the top step himself. His wife opened the front door behind him and asked what was happening. He did not turn around. He said, quietly, without looking at her, "Yvonne, go back inside. Call Alicia. Do not come out here." She did not go back inside. She stood in the doorway for the rest of the arrest. The agents cuffed him on the front step. Kaczmarek did not read the charges aloud in front of his wife. She waited until they were seated in the back of the vehicle. Raymond spoke twice on the drive to the federal courthouse. The first thing he said was, "How many buildings did you look at?" Kaczmarek told him. The second thing he said was, "I want a lawyer." He did not speak again. The search of the guest bedroom closet turned up the fireproof safe. Inside the safe were $9,400 in cash, arranged in unmarked envelopes, and a small brown spiral notebook. The notebook contained addresses. No names, no amounts, just addresses, roughly 40 of them, each with a small tick mark next to it. Kaczmarek would later match every address in the notebook to a unit Raymond had passed and a landlord who had paid him. Raymond Childs was indicted on May 21, 2019, by a federal grand jury sitting in the District of Maryland. The indictment ran to 38 counts, 18 counts of federal program bribery under 18 U.S.C., paragraph 666, 9 counts of honest services wire fraud, 6 counts of conspiracy to defraud the United States, 5 counts of making false statements on federal inspection documents. The county state's attorney added parallel state charges of official misconduct and misconduct in office to preserve the option of a separate prosecution if the federal case did not run to trial. Raymond retained a defense attorney out of Baltimore named Cassius Whitmarsh, a former federal public defender who had built a private practice representing public officials in corruption cases. Whitmarsh moved immediately for a bail hearing. Raymond posted a $200,000 surety bond secured by the equity in his home and was released to home confinement on May 23rd. He surrendered his county badge, his inspection credentials, and his passport. His employment with the Fairmont County Housing Authority was formally terminated on the same day. His pension, 22 years vested, was frozen pending the outcome of the criminal case, per the terms of the state employee misconduct forfeiture statute. The case, as of the recording of this episode, has not gone to trial. Raymond Childs entered a plea of not guilty at his arraignment on June 4, 2019. Whitmarsh has filed a series of pretrial motions, including a motion to suppress the notebook recovered from the guest bedroom closet on grounds that the search warrant scope did not clearly authorize the opening of the safe, and a motion to exclude the ledger recovered from Delroy Van Sant's leasing office on hearsay grounds. Both motions remain pending before the assigned district judge. The trial date has been rescheduled twice at the request of the defense and once at the request of the government to accommodate the ongoing cooperation of Van Sant and Deutscher, both of whom have entered into plea agreements and are expected to testify Maricela Odom, the tenant at 4218 Halversham, whose complaint had reached Priscilla Nagel, was interviewed by federal investigators in the spring of 2019 and gave a statement that would eventually become part of the government's proffered evidence. She described a winter in which her 3-year-old had been hospitalized twice for respiratory issues she believed were tied to the mold in the apartment's bathroom, in which her 11-year-old had begun sleeping in the same bed as her siblings because of the cold, and in which she had, at one point in early February, considered giving up the voucher entirely and moving her family into her mother's 1-bedroom apartment in a neighboring county, rather than continuing to live in an apartment that no one in authority appeared willing to help her fix. She did not do it. She stayed. Her family was relocated by emergency federal order on February 26, 2019, into a private market apartment whose owner is now on the Housing Authority's clean referral list. At a status conference on August 11, 2019, the federal judge assigned to Raymond's case, addressing the government's motion for a continued travel restriction, said this from the bench. The court is mindful that Mr. Childs enjoys the presumption of innocence and that no trial has yet taken place. The court is also mindful that the alleged conduct here is not a paper crime. Families, real families, spent winters in apartments that the inspection process was designed to keep them out of. The presumption of innocence belongs to Mr. Childs, but the presumption that the process worked does not belong to anyone in this room. The trial, at the time of this recording, is scheduled to begin in the fall. Raymond Childs is at home. His wife, according to a filing made by the defense in support of the ongoing home confinement arrangement, has continued to reside in the residence with him. His daughter has not, according to the same filing, returned to the home since the day of the arrest. Delroy Van Sant is awaiting sentencing. Cornell Deutscher is awaiting sentencing. Trent Woolwine has been charged in a separate indictment. Priscilla Nagel has been reassigned to a permanent supervisory audit position and now trains new state auditors in re-inspection methodology. Maricela Odom lives in a 2-bedroom in a different county with a landlord she has not met. The inspection existed for one reason, so that a family relying on a voucher, a family whose leverage in the housing market was already almost nothing, could at least be sure that the apartment they were being sent into would not hurt them. Raymond Childs sold that safeguard. He sold it in $800 increments and $1,200 increments, and, on his best month, in envelopes totaling $2,200, and the price of every one of those bribes was paid, not by him, but by families with nowhere else to go. Families who spent winters in apartments with no heat. Families whose children slept in bedrooms with wiring that could have started a fire any night. Families who called a hotline and were told, by the very inspector who had signed the pass, that the landlord had been notified and repairs were pending. The trial has not happened yet, but the paper is on file, 41 units, 2 inspectors, 1 address at a time, and the same signature on the wrong side of every one of them. This case was cold in a way I did not expect, but the case on the right-hand side is the one that makes me question whether anyone was ever really watching. Click it now.